Test, test, test. Good morning to our small but mighty attendance and audience today in the Banking Committee. Thank you to everyone who's attending here. Oh, Veterans Committee. Yep, banking is happening simultaneously, and I was just reading. Thank you to everyone who's joining the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We are going to convene what will be, I think, well, legislative purpose, the shortest public hearing that the General Assembly has ever had, with only 5 speakers registered to speak. But for the start of the day, I would like to give each of our leaders an opportunity to speak. So I am State Representative Jamie Foster. I serve Ellington, East Windsor, and Vernon, proudly serving as the chair of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee in the House. And I will defer now to my Senate co-chair.
I'm State Senator Paul Honig, representing the 8th District, and happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation about these important bills.
Next, Rep. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Anderson, I represent the 62nd District. Also looking forward to hear the testimony today. Few but important pieces of legislation to affect our veterans and military who we value. Thank you.
And lastly, ranking member in the Senate, Senator Gordon.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Jeff Gordon, 35th District. I'm looking forward to today's public hearing and hearing from people about the bills.
Thank you, Senator Gordon. With no other commentary from members of the committee, the first person that I'm going to call up today is Melissa Willett from the Department of Defense, the New England Region Liaison, who's joining us remotely. All right, not seeing Melissa on. We'll come back to her. Next is Paul Amarone from CBIA.
Good morning, members of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. My name is Paul Amarone. I am a public policy associate. Oh, look at that. Incredible. I am a public policy associate at the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. I am testifying today in support of House Bill 6767, an act concerning a disabled veterans revolving loan fund. This bill would establish at least one disabled veteran business revolving loan fund to support the growth of disabled veteran-owned businesses throughout the state. CBIA supports the committee's efforts to bring this bill forward. Veterans make up a significant portion of the Connecticut population. Many veterans are also business owners. In fact, there are more than 2,300 disabled veterans who own businesses in the state of Connecticut, employing thousands of residents throughout each sector of our economy. Expanding the revolving loan program to provide disabled veteran-owned businesses with loan and grant opportunities to expand their business, hire more employees, and support the veteran workforce pipeline comes at a time when data shows that there has been a significant increase in the disabled veteran population. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the share of U.S. veterans with service-connected disabilities increased from 15% in 2008 to nearly 30% in 2022. As one of our most cherished and vulnerable populations, disabled veteran business owners should have the opportunity to utilize state loans and funding to grow their business and support workforce development measures. Access to capital is one of the major impediments to veterans looking to grow their business. HB 6767 helps close that gap while reaffirming to veterans that they are a key piece of our state's workforce and overall business climate. We ask the committee to support House Bill 6767. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I'm grateful for CBIA's support of this legislation. The majority leader and I worked hard with constituents in both of our districts to try and advance a policy that would support veteran-owned businesses. Are there any things that you think would make a difference in the way that we advance a policy like this? You know, we spent a lot of time sort of debating the cut points of eligibility as a disabled veteran. We are interested, you know, the Women's Business Development Council offers grant programs for women-owned businesses that include grants and loan options. Are there best practices in supporting a specific subset of the population that CBIA thinks that we could draw upon to strengthen this proposal in any way?
Yeah, of course. So I think creating a completely new kind of separate, just getting off the ground program would be problematic. So I think using existing workforce pipelines or workforce funding or programs to support this additional program. Like you said, we have the Women's Business Development Council that offers grant and loan opportunities to women-owned businesses. So I think utilizing a model like that and not recreating the wheel will help us get this off the ground and actually get it out to the veterans. One of the biggest things that we hear, I sit on the governor's workforce subcommittee on veterans. One of the biggest things we hear is veterans aren't aware of the programs that are out there. So instead of creating another program that we need to get them aware of, I think utilizing existing state programs, workforce pipelines, funding opportunities for them would be the best step forward.
Great, I appreciate it. Any other questions from members of the committee? Yep, Rep. Anderson.
Starting on line 102, I'm not quite sure, and maybe the chair can clarify, but the 75%, at least 75%, would that mean 25% could be used for non-disabled veterans?
Based on the language of the bill, that's my interpretation.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much
Great.
for joining us today. The next person signed up to testify is Emily Trudeau from the Connecticut Bar Association's Military Affairs section.
Is it on now? Great, thank you. Senator Honning, Representative Foster, Senator Gordon, and Representative Anderson, and members of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. My name is Emily Trudeau. I am a Bronze Star decorated disabled veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom and former staff judge advocate to Naval Special Warfare Group 4. I'm speaking to you today in my official capacity as chair of the Veteran and Military Affairs section of the Connecticut Bar Association, expressing our unanimous support for House Bill number 7121, an act excluding veterans' federal service-connected disability benefits for purposes of eligibility for assistance for a public defender. You will hear from my vice chair and executive director of the Connecticut Veterans Legal Center on some of the arguments for this bill as they relate to federal law and legislative history. But I wish to address this more from our moral imperatives from the perspective of both a veteran and someone with experience working in the criminal justice system. My views do not necessarily reflect those of the Division of Criminal Justice. Let me begin by saying that negative stereotypes about veterans hurt the veteran community. One thing that contributes to those stereotypes is the fact that we are involved in the criminal justice system at a disproportionate rate. Now, I would submit that one reason for that statistic is not that we are predisposed to criminal behavior, but that we are also disproportionately male, and males are also disproportionately represented in arrest statistics. Sorry, gentlemen. A skewed sample will lead to skewed results, but regardless, the fact remains. There is a disparity, and unless that disparity is addressed, it will continue to create negative stereotypes that harm not just justice-involved veterans, but all veterans. More importantly, these are people who have taken an oath to serve their country and by extension, their society. And that society has failed them. Many of the reasons veterans find themselves in criminal court can be traced back to issues readjusting and assimilating to civilian life. The military does an inadequate job preparing us for that transition, and the civilian world does a poor job helping us to assimilate. If we as a society are unwilling to recognize those unique challenges and help that transition, then we as a society must take responsibility when that transition fails. That failure is our failure. Veterans receiving service-connected disability are receiving it for a reason. They have been injured in the service of their nation. Something has been taken from them that can never be restored. Many, despite their disabilities, are able to find employment, but many are not. Unemployment and underemployment remain a huge problem in the veteran community. A person who, but for the recognition that they should be compensated for injuries sustained in service to their nation, should not be penalized for receiving that payment, especially when the reason for that payment may very well be why they are unable to find higher paying employment. Moreover, a public defender presents one of the most effective avenues to ensure a veteran has the best chance at successful rehabilitation. Having worked closely with these attorneys, I can say they are some of the most knowledgeable, dedicated, and compassionate professionals a client could ever hope for. And most importantly, their practice is limited to that unique geographic area and clients of a low income level.
If you don't mind wrapping up your testimony, ma'am.
Sure. They will be in the best position to know what programs and what resources are available, both based on income and veteran status, as well as resources for any mental health or substance abuse needs that are, again, the result of a lack of effective reintegration resources. The financial footprint of this bill is negligible, and the infrastructure is already in place. It's a small price to pay for a problem largely caused by a failure on societies, and I say that as society as a whole. I think Connecticut does a very good job trying to address veterans' issues, but on society as a whole's failure to help the integration process, and that failure results in veterans being disproportionately involved in the criminal justice system. So again, I'd like to relay our section's unanimous support for this bill, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Emily, for your testimony and your impassioned advocacy. We're grateful to have this concept raised as a priority issue of legal representatives of the veterans community. Rep. Nolan has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming before us. Thank you for talking in regards to the difficulties when it comes to readjustment and assimilating back into our communities after being in the military for as much time as they have, and or going through what a lot of our disabled veterans go through as a sacrifice of them and ending up with the issues that some of them end up with. What do you feel in regards to this bill finally coming to fruition? What do you feel has been the holdback in this?
I think, like a lot of bills, there's always concern about finances. But again, I think the financial footprint of this bill truly is negligible. And one of the things that we noticed while we were looking to advance this bill is that some JDs are already doing this and others are not. So we have a disparity issue where veterans in one town might be getting the benefit of a public defender and others aren't. And we see that as a very, very large problem. And that was information that was passed on to us by some of the veteran service officers. And I just want to put this in context as far as what the actual financial footprint of this bill would be. About 4.5% of Connecticut's population are veterans. And 30% of veterans are arrested at some point in their life, not even this year, but at some point over their entire lifetime. And that includes all eras of veterans from the GWAT era all the way to the Vietnam era. So we're not even talking about 30% of 4%. We're talking about significantly lower than that. And again, we're talking about, of that 30% of 4%, we're talking about only the ones who would be in need of a public defender. So we're talking about a very, very small number of veterans. And we're talking about a very small number of veterans who would be able to avail themselves of an infrastructure that's already in place. We already have public defenders. We already have veteran service officers. We already have the programs in place for veterans. This would just simply be expanding that access to a very small group of veterans. But to that very small group of veterans, this is extremely important because it's making sure that they're getting those services to help with a successful rehabilitation after their involvement in the criminal justice system. Because again, one of the greatest goals of the criminal justice system, and I can say that as someone who works in that system, is rehabilitation whenever possible.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming before us and explaining a little bit more in detail. I think that it's important that we open our eyes to this and that we continue to feed this through to the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate this being a raised concept for our committee to consider, and I think it begs the question after hopefully we can pass this legislative session, if there is perhaps more work that we might need to do as a committee in coordination with, for example, the Human Services Committee. I was surprised to find out that there's been over 1,300 peer-reviewed published research articles on justice involvement in the veterans population. And one of the strongest correlations is TBI, service-connected TBI and a attributed factor. And so it just feels like this is a small lift, this legislative session, that we can make in support of this population, but it does beg the question if we need to be doing more. And so we'll have to be coordinating moving forward to see if there's more and better advocacy that we could be doing, because we certainly want to not just help with their justice engagement, but perhaps more comprehensively help with medical and health interventions related to TBI or substance abuse, which seem to be the
That's
driver.
exactly right. And had I not been cut off, one of the points I would have raised is that, again, my section has unanimous support for this bill. Speaking in my personal capacity, I don't think it goes far enough because I think that we also need to do more to educate all aspects of the system. Because, for example, when a prosecutor on the record scoffs at an individual's service, or a new defense attorney doesn't know how to read a service record and misses potentially mitigating information, like, for example, the effects of TBI and how that may have played a role in the incident, or when a judge doesn't know what programs are actually out there, all of these things are problems. And all of these problems do exist. And these are all things that can be easily solved with more education and more awareness. And that's an easy problem to solve if people are willing to solve it.
I appreciate you raising this to our attention, and I think we should have future conversations about what more we can do. Is there
Absolutely.
anything else from your testimony that you've missed sharing with us that you'd like to add?
I believe that kind of wraps it up.
Okay.
I would have given you some more statistics and more numbers, but we can talk offline about that.
Wonderful. And please I'm not sure that I saw your testimony yet locked, but we'll look forward to reading it too and making sure all the members who weren't able to be here today see it too. So thank you. Any other questions? Yep. Rep. DiCaprio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just you mentioned your comment about the military preparing someone for transition. Can you just talk about that a little bit? You know, what might be involved and what you would suggest?
Sure. Service members go through a program called TAP. It's the Transition Assistance Program. And a number of us don't find it particularly helpful. I went through it myself, and that's kind of my opinion of it as well. There are things that they teach you. There are things that they don't teach you. And for example, they will spend a lot of time on how to write a resume, but they don't teach you how to respond when a potential employer either doesn't know how to read that resume or doesn't believe that resume, because how could this person have possibly done all of this at the young age that they are, and doesn't even bother to give you an interview. They tell you to wear a suit for an interview, but they don't teach you how to respond to an employer who tells you you're rude because you respond to a yes or no question with a yes or no answer, because you last worked for a Navy SEAL who wanted yes or no answers and did not have a lot of time for pages of legal analysis. They just wanted to know yes or no. They teach you how to go through medical, which is a very valuable part of the program. I will say that is probably the part of the transition assistance program that had the most benefit, how to deal with the VA, how to make sure that you are getting the appropriate disability rating. But they don't teach you how to deal with, when you get out, having people question your disability status and question whether or not you're faking your disability status, or not considering your disability status in an employment situation in which they're supposed to consider that status. They don't consider, or they don't teach you how to respond when an employer rolls their eyes at you when you ask them, hey, can I move my desk so that I'm actually facing the door? Because after spending a year in Iraq in an active sniper situation, I'm a little leery about, not being able to see the doorway. These are all kind of things that veterans do deal with in the workforce, and they're not things that we're prepared for at all. And one of the biggest ones is how to deal with the frustration you feel hearing, on the one hand, thank you for your service, and will all of our veterans please rise so we can acknowledge you at a sporting event, but then facing unemployment and underemployment issues everywhere you look. And that is a huge, huge problem for the veteran community. And so these are things that the Transition Assistance Program do not prepare you for at all. And I think these are things that, knowing that we're not being prepared for these situations, these are things that we can better educate the civilian population on, so that we're not facing these stigmas and these stereotypes and these hurdles when we try to transition into the civilian world.
How long is that program typically?
Less than a week.
Less than a week. Okay. I have two son-in-laws that are active duty, and I know one of them has been through some real challenging times. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from members of the committee, thank you, Emily, for joining us today. We appreciate your expertise as always.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Melissa Willett from the Department of Defense, joining us on Zoom.
Good morning. Sorry about the glitch earlier. I wasn't able to accept the panelist invitation from my phone, or my computer, so I had to switch to my phone.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Senator Honig, Representative Foster, and honorable members of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, the Department of Defense is grateful for the opportunity to provide comment on the policies reflected in House Bill 7123, which aims to increase education support for military families with school-age children. My name is Melissa Willett, and I'm the New England Region Liaison at the Defense State Liaison Office, operating under the direction of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. We represent the department and establish relationships with state and local leaders on issues currently impacting our service members and their families. Approximately 185,000 U.S. military children move between schools annually, and military families are at a disadvantage when it comes to enrollment options available to their children. Due to the timing of these military-directed moves, military families change school systems upwards of 10 times prior to graduation, and some of these moves are simply relocating from temporary to permanent housing in the same state or region. Establishing placement stability facilitates the uninterrupted educational progress of our military-connected children and supports both academic and social continuity. Placement stability is a targeted fix for Connecticut's military families, letting students stay in their schools through a move, whether across town or beyond. With 4,300 active duty military children in the state, Connecticut is in a unique position to have a positive effect on the educational experiences of military children and families. As the saying goes, you recruit the service member, but you retain the family. Family satisfaction is at the forefront of retaining talent, and education instability has the potential to deter our uniformed service members from accepting or extending tours of duty. Similarly, special education support continues to be a barrier for highly mobile children. Studies show that military families and schools alike regularly do not assume that advanced enrollment, a policy implemented here in Connecticut, includes those with special education needs. A Partners in Promise study found that only 16% of respondents with special education needs have ever been able to advance enroll their student, despite their state having advanced enrollment policies. Of those who have never used advanced enrollment, 78% were told because it was not an option. House Bill 7123 would clarify that students with special education needs are included. In fact, if a school is able to get a student's special education plan prior to arrival, that district will be better situated to provide immediate comparable services to the military-connected child with special education needs. In closing, we are grateful for the tremendous efforts Connecticut has historically made to support our military family members and service members. We appreciate the opportunity to support these policies reflected in the bill and thank the committee for raising. Thank you for taking the time to consider and deliberate on this issue, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I think there's a question for my co-chair, Senator Honig.
Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Willett, and advocating for our military families. I have a question around special ed, which, I can understand how it's extremely difficult for military families with special needs kids moving from place to place and making sure that they get the services that they need in their new locations. We had some testimony from the Department of Education here about the specific language that's in this bill regarding reevaluations of special ed students with IEPs or 504 plans 30 days after enrollment in the school. And their concern was that reevaluation might not be might not be needed or might not be possible within 30 days. And their recommendation is that rather than a reevaluation, that the 30-day timeline should be applied to convening either a PPT meeting or a Section 504 meeting. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on those comments from the Department of Education.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked with the school liaison officer at the subbase down in New London, as well as other stakeholders in the region on similar policy priorities, and that's a concern that we hear from the departments of education routinely. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect with what the Department of Defense is seeking with this policy priority. Most departments of education have looked at that best practice and assumed that it means reevaluation for a new IEP. From the Department of Defense perspective, we're seeking the reevaluation of the IEP the child already has. So within 30 days of the military connected child enrolling in the new school district, that receiving school district, the IEP that's being transferred, that's the IEP that would be reviewed, not reevaluation for new services, but the evaluation of the IEP or the 504 plan that the student is going to the new school with.
Thank you. So when they testified saying that the 30-day timeline would be to convene either a PPT or Section 504 meeting, presumably that would be to reevaluate the new information or the information that's new to that new school district. Does that make sense? You guys are actually on the same page with that?
I believe we're on the same page with that. As long as they would be reviewing that document or the documentation that was sent with the child, that's what the Department of Defense is hoping that departments of education and these regional school districts would look at when those military families are relocating, instead of starting the process all over again. Because oftentimes what we're hearing are military families are relocating from one duty station to the other or another, and those comparable services are either not being rendered or the evaluations are not happening timely enough so that the student or the military family PCSs to a new duty station by the time the evaluation and those new services are implemented. So this 30 days is a reevaluation of the old IEP that the current or that the student had from their old school that they're trying to transfer to the new school.
Thank you. And one more section of their testimony talked about students being able to remain in their current school.
Mm-hmm.
And the Department of Education was concerned that the way the language of the bill is worded, that the student would be able to remain in their current school throughout, the end of high school, as opposed to just the, finishing out that year in a particular school. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually we're working a similar policy priority up in Maine with the Education Committee. And one recommendation that we've heard is for any junior or senior student particularly senior students, they would be able to finish out their school year in order to graduate from that particular school. But a military connected child that may be in kindergarten to 10th grade, they could finish out the current school year in that district before moving with their military family to their new residence or their new duty station.
Thank you. Thank
So
you, Madam.
yeah, completely okay with those timeframes if that is the direction that the General Assembly would like to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your testimony. I think we'll likely be coordinating in the future to sort of see if we can reconcile feedback from the State Department of Education to what the DoD is asking for to make sure we get something that not just works for the advocacy
Yep.
from the DoD's perspective in military families, but we also works within the statutory framework we have in our education system here in Connecticut. So thank you so much for your testimony. Seeing no other questions, I hope you have a great day.
Yes, you also.
The next person testifying is Allison Weir.
Senator Honig, Representative Foster, Senator Gordon, and Representative Anderson, and members of the committee. My name is Allison Weir, and I'm the Executive Director of Connecticut Veterans Legal Center and an Air Force veteran. I've submitted testimony on 3 bills, but I'd like to focus my attention today on the HB 7121, an act excluding veteran service-connected disability benefits for purpose of eligibility for assistance from the public defender, and briefly remark on HB 5074. Establishing a special license plate for women veterans. The Connecticut Veterans Legal Center provides free legal assistance to low-income veterans living in Connecticut. Approximately 44% of our clients have a service-connected disability rating from their service and receive VA disability benefits. We do not provide criminal legal services, but some of our clients are or have been involved in the criminal justice system. As the Council on Criminal Justice Veterans Justice Commission notes, studies show that service-connected trauma exposure, combined with an increased incidence of mental health and substance use disorders, elevates veterans' risk of involvement with criminal justice system. It's particularly acute for post 9/11 veterans who have experienced a higher rate of combat deployment and redeployment than earlier generations. In 2012, this legislature recognized that veterans with disability are more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system, and thus expanded the pretrial supervised discretionary program to include veterans to improve their judicial outcome. This bill would be another step in supporting veterans who are having a difficult transition to civilian life by ensuring that veterans receiving disability compensation who are involved in the justice system have an attorney by their side. The treatment of service-connected disability compensation as not income is consistent with both the Federal Internal Revenue Service and the State Department of Revenue Services, which do not count such a payment as income. It's also consistent with the intent of the payment as compensation for an injury caused by the veteran's service to the nation, which can impair the veteran's ability to earn a living. This bill would provide clarity to all public defenders' offices that veteran disability payments should not be counted as income. As has been mentioned in the past, from conversations we've had with veteran justice officers at the VA, it's our understanding that the veteran disability compensation as income varies by judicial office. Colorado courts exclude veterans' disability payments from income when determining eligibility for public defenders, as well as other programs such as guardian ad litem and in-court visitors. With this bill, we don't think Connect would be breaking new ground and would simply ensure consistent treatment of veteran disability payments across all judicial divisions. Finally, I just want to touch on Committee Bill 5074, which establishes a license plate for women veterans. As a woman veteran, I'm of course supportive of this, but the one amendment I would suggest is that the bill would be for the proceeds to go to causes specifically benefit women veterans. The number of women veterans facing homelessness has increased 24% from 2020 to 2023. Women veterans are more likely to have suffered military sexual trauma and experience intimate partner violence. They're also more likely to be shouldering the childcare responsibilities, particularly among single parents. Recognition of women veterans is important, but this recognition could also support and assistance. It would be even more impactful. Thank you for your work to improve the lives of Connecticut veterans, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your testimony. I think we raised this bill based on your joining us in our speed dating at the beginning of the legislative session. So we certainly want to make sure we are meeting the intended purpose. So I'm grateful that you support it. Any other questions from members of the committee? Rep. Nolan.
Not a question, just a statement, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank you for coming before us and being such a staunch supporter and remaining in contact with us for not only this, but a great deal of things that are beneficial for our veterans. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you more to make sure that we take care of our veterans. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much. And I think that was probably the most successful speed dating event I've ever had. So thank you very much.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I did too. We certainly learned a lot that day, and we got a lot of great ideas from people who joined us. So thank you. Seeing no other questions from the committee, the last person, but certainly not the least on our legislative agenda is Anthony DeCourcio. I mispronounced his last name. I'm sorry, Anthony. We've just been emailing, so I've never said it out loud.
Good morning. My name is Anthony DiCiaccio. I am a veteran, 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment, former sergeant, also served with 1st Battalion, 9th Artillery Regiment. I'm here supporting HB 6767, an act concerning disabled veterans revolving loan fund. Thank you for having me here today. I want to say that this bill is an opportunity for the state to stand with the veteran community, to spur economic growth and support successful businesses by providing critical funding as defined in the passages of this bill. I would like to emphasize that this bill will help incentivize and help retain existing businesses within the state and signal to the roughly 2,300 veteran-owned small businesses throughout the state that they are not alone in the pursuit of success and stability. Additionally, showing that this state is competitive in not only driving growth economically, but also supporting those who have provided a service to this country and recognize the value of veteran-owned businesses that they bring to our community. This is not just an investment in economic development and growth, but also a statement through meaningful action to provide those that have served with the resources and opportunities needed to succeed. And thank you for your support in this endeavor.
Well, I want to start by thanking you for being a thought partner in us trying to work this legislation out. I was grateful that your representative and I could coordinate on this because I think that we're getting to a place where we're going to make a little bit of movement here in veterans employability, particularly for young veterans. I have a group of 5 constituents who I email pretty regularly, and I have been in the 4 years since I've been in service, who are young vets like you, and who employability post-service was not what they had thought it was going to look like. And I think this is one lever, and I think that there need to be more moving forward. So is there anything else you'd like us to be doing in addition to help young veterans like yourself sort of access the full potential of their military service record as they transition into civilian life and employment after? Are there more things that we could be doing that we've not done so far?
I think that this is a step in the right direction. And I think follow-on steps, just coordinating outreach. And again, to Emily's point previously, as she mentioned, the transition is not an easy process from military to civilian sector. I got out in 2016. I attended University of New Haven, got a bachelor's degree in international economics with a focus in macro and Russian. After I knocked my undergrad out in 2.5 years, I applied to 400 jobs and was unsuccessful in obtaining employment. I was turned down by Amazon. I was turned down by Lowe's. And it was very difficult finding people that understood my resume, that understood the background that it entails. So I think part of it is just coordinating with local businesses. I'm a big fan of manufacturing, I'm a large proponent of it. My full-time job, I work at Concept, but I think that this is moving in the right direction for it. So.
I appreciate you you sharing that story. One of the things that one of my constituents shared with me, and he was unable to be here today to testify, but was that he thinks that, you know, in general, for young veterans as they transition through the service out of, you know, other employment, is that sort of translating your service record to a resume and making sure people read this. This is something Emily shared with us multiple times in her testimony throughout the year, that people just don't really understand
Correct.
military service and what it means. And so one of the things that was raised that we were hoping could be of consideration this legislative session was that, at least for state service and for state employees, that there would be a sort of translation between your military service record and what that might look like if you had gained similar experience in state service. So if you were applying for a job at the state, there would be a translation from your military service record to state service. And that's going to be a challenging thing for us to flesh out. I think it's going to take more than a session, but do you think that would have made a difference for you? I mean, maybe not in the private sector employment, but would that have made a difference for you if you had been applying for state jobs?
Yes. Yes, I do think it would have.
You think it's really just fundamentally that civilians don't understand what your service record meant?
And I think working in a state capacity would be a tremendous opportunity. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the state application process while I was going through my undergrad and during my transition from military to civilian. But I think it's a wonderful route and it's a great option to have.
I appreciate your testimony. Do any other members of the committee have any questions? Well, that was an easy day for you, but we'll stay in touch and keep on coordinating. Thank you so much for your testimony and for your ideas, and we look forward to collaborating.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Well, with that, that was, I think we deserve a medal. I think that was a record. The fastest public hearing the Connecticut General Assembly has ever had. I'm going to just claim that victory as ours. We're grateful to everyone for testifying, and we look forward to continuing to engage with the veterans and military community. And thank you to everyone who testified before us today.